March 11, 1942, 10:47, post-meridium. General Douglas MacArthur stood on the dock at Corregidor Island in Manila Bay, staring at 4 battered PT boats that represented his only escape from the Philippines. Behind him, 78,000 American and Filipino soldiers were trapped on the Bataan Peninsula, surrounded by 200,000 Japanese troops, starving, diseased, running out of ammunition. They had been promised reinforcements that would never come. They had been promised supplies that would never arrive. They had been told to hold out for help that did not exist. And now their commanding general was being ordered to abandon them. MacArthur had argued with President Roosevelt for 3 weeks, refusing the evacuation order, insisting he would stay and fight to the death alongside his men. But Roosevelt's final message was unambiguous. "You will proceed to Australia. That is an order." The words MacArthur spoke in that moment, standing between loyalty to his trapped army and obedience to his commander-in-chief, would define his legacy and reveal the brutal mathematics of a war where 78,000 lives could be sacrificed as an acceptable loss if it preserved one strategic asset. This is the story of what MacArthur said when he realized his entire army had been written off as expendable, and how his reaction exposed the economic calculation that had already determined the Philippines were not worth saving. In December 1941, when Japanese forces invaded the Philippines just 10 hours after Pearl Harbor, MacArthur commanded the largest American military force outside the continental United States. His Far East Command included 31,000 American troops, 120,000 Filipino Army soldiers, and the United States Asiatic Fleet. On paper, it appeared formidable. In reality, it was a hollow force built on promises that Washington had no intention of keeping. The War Department's War Plan Orange, the official strategy for Pacific defense, had been clear since 1924. In the event of Japanese attack, Philippines forces would conduct a fighting withdrawal to the Bataan Peninsula, hold out for 6 months, and await relief from the Pacific Fleet sailing west from Pearl Harbor. The plan assumed the fleet would arrive in 180 days maximum. But War Plan Orange had one catastrophic flaw. It was written before anyone knew that Japan would destroy the Pacific Fleet on day 1 of the war. December 8, 1941. MacArthur received word that Pearl Harbor had been attacked. His Far East Air Force, 107 B-17 bombers and 140 P-40 fighters, was the most powerful American air formation in the Pacific. It was also parked in neat rows on Clark Field and Iba airfields, completely unprotected. MacArthur's Chief of Staff, Major General Richard Sutherland, urged immediate dispersal of aircraft. MacArthur hesitated. 9 hours after Pearl Harbor, while MacArthur was still deciding what to do, Japanese bombers from Formosa appeared over Clark Field. They destroyed 18 B-17s on the ground. They destroyed 53 P-40s on the ground. In 30 minutes, Japan eliminated American air power in the Philippines without encountering a single fighter. The planes that were supposed to defend the islands never even took off. By December 10th, MacArthur had lost 90% of his air force to enemy action and his own indecision. The Far East Command, which was supposed to hold for 6 months, had been crippled in 48 hours. By December 22nd, Japanese ground forces had landed at 3 points on Luzon Island. MacArthur ordered the withdrawal to Bataan Peninsula exactly as War Plan Orange specified. 78,000 troops, 15,000 civilians, and 26,000 horses retreated into a jungle peninsula 25 miles long and 20 miles wide. They brought supplies calculated to last 6 months for 40,000 people. They now had 78,000 soldiers, 15,000 refugees, and almost no food. The mathematics were brutal and immediate. Standard U.S. Army ration, 4,000 calories per day. Available food stores, sufficient for 40,000 men for 180 days. Actual personnel requiring food, 93,000. Either cut rations to 1,700 calories per day, less than half normal requirement, or run out of food in 70 days. There was no third option. MacArthur chose starvation over surrender. He cut rations to 2,000 calories on January 5th, to 1,500 calories on January 15th, to 1,000 calories on February 1st. By March, soldiers were eating horses, mules, and anything that moved. Malaria infected 65% of the force. Dysentery affected 80%. Beriberi from vitamin deficiency crippled thousands. Men were dying from disease faster than from Japanese bullets. Meanwhile, MacArthur sent increasingly desperate messages to Washington. He requested ammunition. He requested food. He requested medicine. Most critically, he requested reinforcement by the Pacific Fleet, which War Plan Orange promised would arrive to break the siege. Washington's responses were masterpieces of bureaucratic evasion. January 9th, reinforcements are being assembled. No timeline provided. January 23rd, supplies are being prepared for shipment. No departure date given. February 3rd, the Navy is developing plans for relief operations. No commitment to execute. MacArthur understood what the carefully worded messages meant. The Pacific Fleet wasn't coming. The battleships that were supposed to sail west and defeat the Japanese Navy were at the bottom of Pearl Harbor. The carriers that survived were desperately needed to defend Hawaii, Australia, and the critical supply lines to both. The Philippines had been written off. 78,000 men were expendable, but MacArthur himself was not. February 23rd, President Roosevelt personally messaged MacArthur with an order phrased as a request. The situation in Australia is critical. You are needed there to command Allied forces. You are ordered to proceed to Melbourne as soon as possible. MacArthur's response was immediate and furious. He drafted a message stating he would remain with his troops, that abandoning them was dishonorable, that a general's place was with his men regardless of orders. Major General Sutherland read the draft and told MacArthur it would be interpreted as insubordination and result in court-martial. MacArthur revised the message. I request permission to remain with my command and share the fate of the garrison. Roosevelt's reply came within 12 hours. Your request is denied. You will comply with previous orders. That is final. The President of the United States had directly commanded MacArthur to abandon his army. There was no more room for argument. March 8th. MacArthur gathered his senior staff and informed them of the evacuation order. The room fell silent. Major General Jonathan Wainwright, who would assume command of Philippine forces after MacArthur's departure, asked the obvious question, "What do I tell the men?" MacArthur had no answer. What could he say? That Washington had decided they were acceptable losses? That the strategic value of holding Japan's attention while America rebuilt its fleet outweighed their lives? That 78,000 soldiers would be sacrificed to buy 6 months of time? The silence stretched for nearly a minute before MacArthur spoke the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Tell them help is on the way. Tell them reinforcements are coming. Tell them whatever keeps them fighting. Everyone in the room knew it was a lie. Help was not coming. Reinforcements did not exist. The men would fight and die and surrender. And their general would be in Australia. March 11th, 1047, post-meridium. MacArthur boarded PT-41, one of 4 patrol torpedo boats that would attempt the 600-mile journey through Japanese-controlled waters to Mindanao, where a B-17 would fly him to Australia. His wife John and son Arthur accompanied him. Also evacuating, key staff officers, the core of a command structure that could be rebuilt in Australia, left behind 78,000 men who had been promised rescue. As the PT boat's engines started, MacArthur turned to his aide, Colonel Sidney Huff, and spoke the words that would become famous. I came through, and I shall return. But what most historical accounts omit is what he said next, words recorded in Huff's diary but rarely quoted. They will think I'm a coward. They will say I abandoned them, and they will be right. MacArthur understood exactly what his evacuation looked like from Bataan. The general who had promised to stay, who had sworn they would be rescued, was leaving while they starved. The PT boats reached Mindanao after 35 hours of hiding from Japanese patrols. The B-17 flight to Australia took another 9 hours. When MacArthur landed in Melbourne on March 17th, reporters asked for his message to the American people. He gave them the polished version, "I came through and I shall return." It became one of the most famous quotes of the war, a promise of redemption, a vow of liberation. But the words he spoke on Corregidor dock revealed the truth. He knew he was abandoning men who would die because of a strategic calculation that valued one general's future usefulness over 78,000 soldiers' present lives. On April 9, 1942, the Bataan garrison surrendered. 76,000 men, 12,000 American and 64,000 Filipino, became prisoners of war. The Japanese forced them on the Bataan Death March, a 65-mile walk without food, water, or rest. Between 7,000 and 10,000 died on the march from execution, disease, or exhaustion. The survivors were imprisoned in camps where 40% died before the war ended. Total casualties from the Philippine campaign: 23,000 dead, 70,000 captured. Nearly all could have been evacuated if the United States had prioritized rescue over strategic positioning. MacArthur did return, October 20th, 1944. He waded ashore at Leyte Gulf, the famous photograph that symbolized American victory in the Pacific. By then, most of the men he had abandoned were dead. The few who survived the prison camps were walking skeletons who weighed 90 pounds and would carry the physical and psychological scars forever. MacArthur never publicly addressed his evacuation in emotional terms. He framed it as strategic necessity, as following orders, as preserving command capability for future operations. All technically true. But his private correspondence tells a different story. In a 1953 letter to General Wainwright, MacArthur wrote, "Not a day passes that I do not think of those men on Bataan. I wake at night hearing them ask why I left. I have no answer that satisfies my conscience, though my mind understands the necessity." The calculation that saved MacArthur and sacrificed 78,000 was pure military economics. One experienced four-star general with strategic vision was worth more to the war effort than an entire trapped army that could not be supplied, could not be reinforced, and could not meaningfully affect Japan's offensive operations. The Philippines would fall regardless of whether MacArthur stayed or left. His death or capture would serve no purpose except symbolic. His survival enabled him to command the Southwest Pacific area, to develop the island-hopping strategy, to eventually liberate the Philippines with a force 10 times larger than what he abandoned. The mathematics justified the decision. But mathematics cannot measure shame, and shame was what MacArthur carried for the rest of his life. What he said when ordered to abandon his army revealed a man torn between duty and honor, between strategic reality and personal loyalty, between the general who understood necessity and the soldier who knew what he was doing to the men who trusted him. The Philippines fell, the soldiers died, MacArthur returned, and the war was won. The calculation worked exactly as planned, but the men who starved on Bataan while their general flew to safety never forgave him, and in his private moments, MacArthur never forgave himself.